Hello everyone and welcome to another Lanzarote information video for you. And this week we're going to be talking about food and specifically about the more unusual food that you're likely to encounter here. Now if you're a regular visitor to the island, and I know many of you are, you'll be used to what I call the usual suspects, so gambas al ajillo, ensaladilla rusa, pimientos padrón, papas arrugadas, and all those kinds of dishes. But today we're going to introduce you to 11 that you may not have come across before, and you may wonder what they are when you see them on a menu. And I'll show you pictures and explain each to you. Now the first one I'm going to talk about is Gofio, G-O-F-I-O. And Gofio is a milled grain that is similar to whole grain flour, and it was a staple of the Canary Islands in the years before tourism and when importing food products was really quite difficult. And like flour, it's used in a number of ways. It can be used to thicken soups and stews. You can make interesting desserts out of it as the base. Canarians add it to coffee, and even ice cream is made from it. It holds a very special place in the heart of the Canarians, and a lot of Canarian children are still weaned on Gofio because it's felt to be very good for them. So look out for that on a menu, and as I say, you won't see it as a menu option, but you'll see it within the description on menus, perhaps of interesting desserts. Now next we have Morena. Morena is the Spanish word for moray eel, and they are abundant around the coasts of Lanzarote. I've dived a lot here and you see them all the time. Now generally there are two ways to serve Morena, which is really considered to be a delicacy here. One way is simply to chop the Morena into rounds and then cook those rounds and serve them. Personally, I'm not so keen on eating them that way because the eel is very, very bony and it's quite difficult to sort of pick your way through the bones when you've got a whole slice, if you like, to deal with. The other way of serving it is called Morena frita. And when you order Morena frita, it's generally slices down the side of the eel that are then deep fried so that they're lovely and crispy and fishy. So that's the way I prefer to eat Morena. Now the next one is called Ropa Vieja, and that literally means old clothes. Nobody really knows where the name came from, but Ropa Vieja was allegedly brought to the Canary Islands from Cuba in the 17th century. And it's a chickpea stew, very heavy on the chickpeas, sometimes but not always also served with chicken or beef, and often served with papas arrugadas, the little wrinkly potatoes that are cooked in salt water or seawater. It's a really hearty and filling stew. The chickpeas really do bulk a meal out, and the sauce that they're cooked in is created from tomato puree, usually paprika, the smoked paprika that comes from central Spain, and perhaps a little bit of spice, a little bit of chili flakes. Next up we've got Carne de Cabra, and Carne de Cabra is goat meat stew. And I know goat isn't commonly eaten in a lot of Northern Europe, but historically it was the main meat dish that was available on the Canary Islands. These days you do see it, but not as often as you used to. Goat meat tends to be quite tough unless it's cooked long and slow, and a traditional Carne de Cabra dish is cooked in exactly that way. It's cooked in red wine, herbs, spices, often with onions, peppers, and it just produces this, when it's cooked for 4, 5, 6 hours in some cases, it produces this beautifully tender, very flavourful meat, and goat tastes like a slightly stronger version of lamb, which you'll all be used to. And that's a good hearty stew. We don't get cold winter days here, but if you want a lovely stew on a Sunday lunchtime, that's the way to go. Now then, let's talk about Caracoles. And caracoles are snails, and snails are part of the island's species, and you'll see them all over the place. And locals catch them and cook them. But unlike the French, who treat them as a bit of a delicacy, they call them escargot, of course. They treat them as a bit of a delicacy and serve them with a quite delicate garlic butter with lots of parsley in it. They're cooked here in a much more hearty way, in a sort of strong tomato sauce, and they're often served with bread to mop up the sauce afterwards. So again, you don't see them very often, but we do have caracoles available in some restaurants here. And next up we have lapas, and this is a real delicacy on the island. They're limpets which are caught on the stones, on the rocks, around the coast of Lanzarote. But here they're served in a flat pan. It looks like one of those Indian bread pans, and they are drenched in olive oil and then heated under a very, very hot grill just for a few minutes until they're just cooked, and then a little dollop of a green mojo sauce is put into each of them, and they are absolutely delicious. Green mojo, for those of you who don't know, is made from cilantro, coriander, and vinegar and finely chopped shallots. Now the next one is a Bocadillo de Pescado, which means basically a bread roll made with fish. Now, this traditionally is served as a breakfast here. It originated as a hearty breakfast for fishermen going out to spend the whole day fishing, but it's now quite commonly eaten by people, and it might sound odd to have a fish sandwich for breakfast, but they are absolutely delicious. And you'll find them in the small cafes, for example, Café Hinori, as it used to be called, in Chaco de San Ginés, does a beautiful fish bocadillo, and bocadillo de pescado, and they're made from the sort of baguette type bread, so you'll have a nice chunk of baguette. The fish will be a very, very thin fillet of a white fish, which is simply dredged in flour and then pan fried until it's crispy. That goes in the bread. It's often served with salad, nearly always served with aioli, which is garlic mayonnaise as well. And it's just a terrific way to start the day with a hearty fish breakfast. And now one of my very favourites, Puntillas de Calamar. And these are basically deep fried baby squid. And these baby squids are dredged in batter and put in the fryer. Very, very simple recipe until they're crispy, and then they're tipped out onto the plate, and they are served with a wedge of lemon that you squeeze all over them, and you can just eat them with your fingers, and they're absolutely delicious. For the British viewers watching, these are the closest things I can think of to the scraps we used to get in fish and chip shops. I don't know if they still do it in the old days, where you get the sort of chunks of batter with the odd bit of fish in it. Absolutely delicious, and one of my favourite Canarian meals. Now we're going back to bocadillos now, and we're going to talk about the Bocadillo de Tortilla Española. And this is exactly as I described the fish bocadillo, so it's a chunk of long bread, but this time it's stuffed with tortilla española, which is the egg tortilla made with potatoes, which you'll find everywhere here in Spain. Again, it's normally served with aioli and often with slices of tomato in it. And where I said the Bocadillo de Pescado was a brilliant breakfast, the Bocadillo de Tortilla Española is a superb lunch. And I'm not kidding, one of these will just set you up for the rest of the day. One of the very best ones I've ever had on the island, and I still go back and visit occasionally to have one of these, is served at the Pecan gas station in Tias, and there's a little cafeteria on the side of that, and they do an absolutely superb Bocadillo de Tortilla Española. Now next up we've got Conejo Campesino, and that is literally country rabbit. And as you know, as I'm sure you know, rabbits were introduced to the island as a food source by the Spanish in the 15th and 16th century, and of course they breed like rabbits, so we have an awful lot of rabbits on the island. We have a very clearly regulated hunting season here, where the hunters can go and catch the rabbits to keep the numbers down and stop them eating everything in sight. And you'll find that they're often served in local restaurants, and they'll put a blackboard outside or a sign in the window to say tenemos conejo, we have country rabbit. Now, if you're not used to eating rabbit, these rabbits are wild and free running and free ranging. The meat is like nothing you've ever tasted if you've tasted a farmed rabbit. It's absolutely beautiful, very gamey, full of flavour. And when they're cooked campesino style, it's really very simple. The rabbit is chopped up into chunks, bones and all, and then it's just fried, shallow fried in a pan with lots of olive oil, loads of garlic and salt and pepper, until the meat's sort of I wouldn't say burned, but crispy and absolutely delicious. And then you just sort of pick the pieces of meat away from the bones and thoroughly enjoy it. And finally, we'll talk about boquerones. And boquerones are small anchovies, but they're nothing like the highly salted anchovies you might have had on a pizza or out of a tin. These aren't cooked actually, they're cured in a mixture of vinegar and olive oil, and they're just generally laid out on a plate, sometimes served with slices of garlic on them, always with a healthy dose of the olive oil vinegar sauce, and sometimes with chopped coriander on them as well. They're absolutely delicious. They're very tender to eat, and you can mop the sauce up with your bread afterwards and have a true garlic fest. So that's it for some unusual foods you may have come across in Lanzarote. Have you enjoyed this video? If so, can I ask you please to give us a like, because it really helps our channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. And if you've got any questions you want to ask, just pop them in a comment below. I read every single comment and I'm very happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much once again for watching, and we'll be back on Thursday with another video, and on Saturday with our famous Lanzarote weekly news. Bye for now, everyone.